What you are about to see is something I can assure you that you won't find anywhere else after all. I am the only creator who not only read all the novels but also plans to narrate the events of the most important ones for your enjoyment. And I don't mean just narrating with random fan art and unrelated backgrounds, but narrating with custom gifs of each character from the series to create a setting as faithful as possible. Obviously, it won't be identical to the anime, but it is what it is. Do I sound arrogant? Maybe, but what can I say, guys? I'm at a point in my life where I feel like Subaru after the scene in Arc 6 that everyone is waiting for. Today I want to talk to you about a character who unfortunately has already finished her cycle, but at the same time, I think the general audience only knows the culmination of this character in the anime and doesn't know everything she went through to reach the end of her path. I'm talking about Elsa Granhiert, the Bowel Hunter, and the reason for your private moments when you watch the first episode of Re:Zero. Believe it or not, the events of the first and second seasons only covered 30% of everything she did in her life. What's more, I bet you didn't know that a large part of the lore we know about Conejotako is thanks to her. And that's because she has 2 long novels set in that country, the country that half the fandom wants the author to explore soon. Another equally interesting thing is that after having tried to kill Emilia, she continued to have roles in side stories, in novels that took place far from Subaru's eyes. Believe me, I will cover all the events she experienced, from her chronologically oldest novel to her most recent mention in what would eventually be a 6th season. Today, I want to pay this tribute to Elsa.
This video is the second part of a series of videos I make where I talk about the complete life of Elsa Granhiert, but I have made these videos so that you can understand what happens without the need to watch the other parts. On this occasion, I will tell you about the events that happen in a novel that takes place 10 years after Elsa meets and works for Capella, but months before Subaru arrives in Lugunica. We will also see how the actions Elsa took during these days ended up making the Archbishop of Lust furious.
Welcome to the biggest video about the gorgeous Elsa Granhiert on the entire internet.
And so, we arrive at a novel that honestly surprises me that very few people know about, because, together with the Apocalypse Girls novel, it is the one with the most lore about Conejotako. Here, they tell us about the Acolyte Knights, who are the equivalent of the Royal Knights of Lugunica, and it goes a bit deeper into the rank of Acolyte Knight, belonging to the Gustekian Church. And it also talks about how orders from the government arrive, and even presents new locations, ones we didn't see during the events of the Apocalypse Girls. Personally, I don't find this novel that interesting, and that is because I feel the author tries to give Elsa some anti-hero attitudes here and there, but doesn't quite manage to convince me completely. You see, in this novel, we see how Elsa temporarily sides with the good guys, and while it is an interesting change, I often end up forgetting this story even exists. So, as I tell you, it's a novel that isn't that memorable for me, but maybe another Elsa fan could give me a different opinion. It is said that this novel takes place 10 years after she started working for Capella, and it is also said that it happens months before Subaru arrives in Lugunica. In fact, it is in this novel where Elsa causes great chaos in Conejotako that makes her go underground, and it is even said that Capella was annoyed with her because of this result. But what did Elsa do that angered Capella? Well, we will discover that little by little. The story starts with an Elsa who has slaughtered a group of guards in a snow camp, and the most interesting thing is that it seems that in these 10 years that passed, Elsa implies that she was away from Conejotako the whole time, and that is due to a comment she makes in this part, where she points out that this place never changes. After defeating the enemies and apologizing to her teammates for taking all the work, they head together to a tavern where she would meet Logris, who had a peculiar reaction to Elsa, and it went like this.
Did you know that even though Elsa is so damn sexy, men will still run away from her? This is revealed in a little-known novel about Elsa that takes place months before episode 1 of the anime.
Everything starts in the freezing kingdom of Conejotako, a place where winter never ends, and faith in the Holy Church is the only way people can endure their miserable existence. Inside a tavern, a group of mercenaries called the Crimson Hunting Squad celebrates their recent victory after a slaughter, mocking the church's teachings while drinking themselves into a stupor. In the middle of this scene of deprivation, a mysterious woman dressed in a fine nightgown enters the bar. It is Elsa Granhiert. Her beauty is so overwhelming that everyone present, blinded by lust and alcohol, is hypnotized by her presence. One of the leaders, Logres, takes advantage of the situation to invite her for a drink, bragging that their employer, Baron Kenash, is footing the bill and that she is the perfect gift for him and his men. He basically thinks Elsa is a woman of the world's oldest profession and that she was sent by his boss to cheer them up. Elsa accepts the invitation with a flirty smile and sits next to Logres, keeping up the act while drinking milk, which is a luxury product in freezing lands. However, the conversation is abruptly interrupted by one of the Baron's subordinates, who demands that Logres report to his lord immediately. However, when the subordinate also asks Elsa to come along, she looks at him with a terrifying intensity because she just noticed that this man was looking at her with fear. Logres, confused but still excited by her company, asks for her name while trying to touch her, without suspecting that he is courting danger itself. When the woman finally says her name, the atmosphere in the tavern freezes instantly. The Bowel Hunter's reputation is so foul that even these veteran mercenaries, used to extreme violence, lose their words upon realizing they have a legendary monster sitting right next to them. Logres, who just a moment ago was bragging about his power and manhood, completely loses his sex drive after discovering the identity of this mysterious woman. It is said that no man in the squad tried to hit on Elsa after this revelation. Afterward, Elsa would have to complete a mission assigned to her by Capella. However, it didn't go well for her, but that is a story you don't know yet. After that, as soon as Elsa, Logres, and the subordinate leave, they head to the chambers of Baron Igor, a very powerful man in Gusteko who curiously had a fixation on Elsa and wanted to make her his property. Don't be confused by this description. It's not that Igor wanted to make her his wife, but rather he actually wanted to have her as a kind of immortal pet. The most curious thing is that Elsa says she finds that proposal interesting, but she isn't attracted to men with an unhealthy lifestyle. After the rejection of the Baron, he entrusts a task to Logres and Elsa, but what task does he entrust them with? He entrusts them with the task of purifying the land of a villain named Victor who is trafficking humans, and that is a crime the Gustekian Church cannot allow. If you are wondering what they mean by purifying, well, it is an elegant way of saying they should kill him. When they ask Igor why they don't mobilize the church's own forces to deal with a traitor to the church itself, Igor mentions that doing so would take time, and it is likely that the church, in revenge for having failed its teachings, would purge the entire place, and that is why they want to solve this problem without the Gustekian Church finding out. And so, Elsa and Logres set off on their mission. By the way, as an additional curiosity, here in this novel it is made clear at all times that what Elsa was looking for with this was money for her services as a mercenary. I say this in case anyone thinks Capella sent her with some other goal in mind. I'll tell you right now that it wouldn't surprise me if Capella, in her spare time, had her beloved children do this kind of work in order to get some financial capital for her plans. I repeat, this is not something confirmed, it is just something I am assuming, but continuing with the story. In the following days, it is said that Elsa and Logres' forces managed to achieve decisive victories for Igor. The guerrilla plan they used was that while Logres and his men attacked the fortresses head-on, Elsa would infiltrate and take out the enemies one by one from the inside. After having cleared one of the many fortresses they were tasked with, Elsa and Logres would have an interesting chat, one where Logres mentions his concerns to Elsa, telling her how he finds it strange that if Baron Victor is a heartless man who traffics in human lives, why do the people in his territory love him so much and seem to give their lives for him? Generally, with the removal of a tyrant, people would support the move, but this does not seem to be the case. Logres realizes this because his family went through a peculiar situation, and recent battles make him unable to avoid remembering that part of his past. Elsa listened to him patiently while she knitted a stuffed animal that was going to be a gift for Meili. She states that she doesn't care about those kinds of trifles, and that she prefers not to think much about it. It's enough for her to see people's guts to motivate herself and keep knitting in her spare time. Logres only asks her to keep this chat in a corner of her mind. And so, days later, the assault on one of Baron Victor's last fortresses would arrive. Elsa, Logres, and Igor's subordinate would repeat the usual tactic. Logres would attack head-on, Elsa would infiltrate and attack the rear, while Igor's subordinate would just stay in the camp giving orders. Then, after Elsa separates, the following would happen.
Mumbling something inaudible, Elsa stepped away from the group to continue on her own. Without leaving a trace on the snowy path, she looked up at the approaching buildings. The structure, hidden in the middle of the blizzard, was completely visible from the outside, thanks to the light of a crystal lamp. Elsa thought that level of carelessness was extremely strange, since, considering their imminent defeat, she found it surprising how carefree they seemed. She wondered if it was possible that the enemy lacked intelligence or had a very poor understanding of the situation. As soon as she started having those doubts, she heard the faint sound of a battle coming from the direction where she had left the Crimson Hunting Squad, understanding that it was the signal that the fortress guards and Logres had started fighting. Her role was to use that battle as cover, to infiltrate the building and take out the enemy's key points. But as she climbed the back wall looking for a way to slip inside, the back entrance of the building opened and a dragon carriage rushed out at full speed right before her eyes. It was a white dragon with a canopy of the same color that blended into the snow. just like the Crimson Hunting Squad's gear. The carriage's speed didn't slow down. On the contrary, it accelerated to the max, moving away from the battlefield. Elsa noticed that Igor's forces weren't deployed in the direction of the escape, and that Logres, facing the enemy at the front, wouldn't be able to notice the carriage's presence. If Elsa let it pass, that vehicle would escape without any obstacles. She then questioned whether it was worth putting off capturing the enemy territory to follow the carriage, finally deciding she could think about it after catching it. Even if capturing the battlefront was delayed a bit, she figured Logres and the others would be able to hold out, so she chose to follow her intuition, which ordered her to chase the carriage. Normally, it would have been almost impossible for a human to catch up to a fleeing earth dragon on their own. The animal pulling the carriage was from the Ares species, the one best adapted to cold climates, with scales the same color as its white fur, capable of running on the snow by digging in its huge claws to anchor itself. Humans, whose feet would get stuck in the snow, could never catch them, and Elsa, despite running as fast as she could, was no exception. Therefore, she followed a simple plan. If she couldn't catch up to the dragon, she simply wouldn't let it escape. She raised her blade and threw it like a disc, sending it spinning toward the fleeing dragon, cutting its thick neck in two from behind. The earth dragon, splashing scarlet blood on the snow, didn't even notice its own death as its head fell. Its huge body collapsed, and the carriage shook violently until it stopped. After hitting her target, Elsa approached the stopped carriage. Just before trying to open the door, she was forced to jump backward as a slash from the inside tore it to pieces. From there, walked out, slowly, a robust man in the prime of his life, with close-cropped grey hair. Despite an old vertical scar running through his left eye, his face, simply adorned with a white moustache, remained stern and refined. Elsa, however, didn't use outward appearance as a standard to judge men, since she believed that what was truly precious lay inside the body. She commented to the man that, in that aspect, he was very much her type. The man replied with a low sigh and, looking sideways at the dead dragon, placed a hand on his silver chestplate, praying for the soul of his mount. Elsa, narrowing her eyes at that elegant gesture, licked her lips and asked him if, because of his prayer and the armor engraved with the mark of the Holy Church, he was an acolyte knight. The man clarified that he was a former acolyte knight, since he had already given up his devotion to the church, and at that moment was just a simple swordsman. While speaking, the man relaxed his hands around his waist, where he carried two thin swords. He grabbed the hilts of both, and got into a stance without drawing them. At first glance, it was a strange stance, but there was no doubt that this was how he fought. Elsa called it wonderful, but the man asked her not to make him repeat that he no longer belonged to the church. She insisted that, even if he had quit, he was still an acolyte knight, and asked if he had received a blessing. He questioned her on whether she really believed he would tell her, to which Elsa replied that she was just asking and that she would let his flesh and blood answer the rest of her questions. With a sweet, sickly, blood-red smile on her face, the battle began. Elsa's silhouette cut through the blizzard and the snow, with footwork so agile that she didn't even crush the white blanket, lunging at the man with a strange but impressive stride. With her blade, she grazed the man's neck, lightly cutting his windpipe with the tip of the knife. The human throat should have turned into a musical instrument, producing the beautiful and desperate sound of someone's last moments. However, the acolyte knight remained still, and even though the strike had landed, his deep green eyes remained unchanged, like the surface of a lake without ripples. In an instant, two blades crossed toward Elsa, grazing her forehead as she twisted her body. The scarlet and blue swords belonged to the katanas the man carried, single-edged weapons, originally from the western region of Kararagi, valued for their terrible sharpness. What surprised Elsa was not the existence of the katanas, but the clear skill in the strikes, especially because they were still inside their sheaths. Elsa asked him when he had drawn them, admitting that he had surprised her. The man, clicking his tongue for missing his first attack, seemed surprised that she had been able to avoid it. Elsa, licking the blood dripping from her cut temple, did a backflip to regain her balance. Elsa concluded that the acolyte knights were truly terrifying. The wind from the swords blew violently, and in the snow, what she saw over and over again was death. The scarlet and blue flashes intertwined, creating a realm of death that would cut anyone who touched it. The reach of his swords was more than double that of her knife. So, unable to approach carelessly, Elsa flew quickly around the man, using her combat instincts to look for a way to win. She concentrated on watching the speed of the attacks, delighted with the skill of the man, who maneuvered his swords back into their sheaths after each strike and cut upon drawing them again. She couldn't find a single opening in his movements. Elsa thought that if she took her time, she would have the advantage. Far away, in the original building, the Crimson Hunting Squad and the Orko's Domain garrison were still fighting, and Elsa figured Logres and the others would end up winning, which would bring reinforcements to her battle and give her the upper hand. However, that would be a supremely boring ending. Determined to avoid a dull outcome, she decided to stay true to the nature of the Bowel Hunter and forcefully rushed straight into the flash of the swords. The man raised his voice at her decisive and barbaric action, considering it a reckless suicide attack. In Elsa's mind, there was no clear solution, but rather a sense of ecstasy that made her blood boil. With a sharp sound that echoed across the snowy field, the impact tore the knife from Elsa's hand. Nonetheless, she managed to block a magnificent scarlet slash and, after a stride, closed in on the man and met the blue strike with her second knife. By blocking both attacks, Elsa lost her weapons, but she closed the distance until her breath became visible. In the next moment, the two edges plunged forward, driving straight into Elsa's flesh. Blood splattered, and the strikes cut her meat deeply. The impact pierced through her bones with a sharp sound, similar to hitting a frozen rock, until finally, someone let out a sigh. It was a sigh of disappointment, even though the man's lips trembled as he watched the figure in front of him with shock. The man called her an idiot, to which Elsa, smiling, replied that the pain was a sign that she was still alive. The swordsman was left speechless. His attacks had directly hit Elsa, who, instead of collapsing, stood completely still with her arms spread out. The blades had pierced through her palms, wrists, forearms, elbows, and upper arms, stopping only when crashing against her shoulder bones. The man's inability to cut all the way through was because Elsa had moved closer to grab the swords by the hilts. It was a crazy decision, losing so much blood and surely both arms, but she declared it was her victory and that she would let him meet an angel. The swordsman asked what on earth that was while trying to pull his swords back, but Elsa leaned forward faster than he could move. Her lips parted and her white teeth sank into the man's neck, tearing it fatally through the gaps in his armor. Bathed in fresh blood and with carmine splatters covering her face, Elsa spat out the flesh in her mouth, admitting that she had really felt that last move, while letting out a breath of relief in the snowy field upon confirming, at last, the demise of her opponent. Her arms, battered by the swords, were unable to move, but Elsa kept walking on the snow, leaving a bloody trail behind her. She peeked inside the carriage the old man had been trying to protect. Behind the slashed door, shivering from the cold wind, were the occupants. At a voice that came from behind her, Elsa turned slowly. The person approaching, standing next to the carriage, was a young man in warm clothes, with a thin smile on his face. Igor's protege. Elsa narrowed her dark eyes at the young man who had appeared alone, without an escort, on the front line. She reminded him that she thought he wasn't supposed to move from the command base, to which the young man replied that he did indeed plan to do so, but if Victor Orkos moved, the story changed, and he had been deployed there for that purpose. After pausing, the young man looked with disdain at the corpse of the robust man lying in the snow, and commented that he guessed he didn't even have a role to play, praising the Bowel Hunter for being even better than they said. Elsa replied that she wasn't sure she could accept his praise in her current situation, asking him why it was necessary for him to come out when Victor Orkos moved. The young man, keeping his smile, returned the question. At a distance of about 10 meters, with nothing blocking their view or their voices, Elsa noticed that her arms were unmovable, her weapons were out of reach, and her heart was beating loudly in her chest. The man lying on the ground was Victor Orkos, the source of the incident, and a traitor who treated his people like slaves. But Elsa noticed that the children in the carriage were dressed in warm furs and heavy clothes, concluding that that was not the kind of clothing you would put on slaves. When the young man asked her what made her say that, she replied coldly that she spoke from personal experience, since slaves usually wear ragged clothes, wounds from beatings, filthy skin, and dirty hair, making it unnatural that they showed none of that. The young man's face tightened slightly at Elsa's plain answer, who remembered her past. With a fake smile and visibly annoyed, the subordinate scratched his head and told her that, since she was Igor's favorite, he didn't want to hurt her. Elsa retorted that she had no interest in the Baron because he was too fat. At the response, the young man warned her that he wouldn't hesitate, and, spreading the palm of his hand toward her, a dazzling flash of white light shot out. It was a hidden life form with supernatural power. Elsa identified the young man as an acolyte knight contracted with a spirit, right before several beams of destructive energy erupted from that white light, engulfing the immobile Elsa in a bright glare that bathed the entire snowy field.
It is unknown how much time passed, but it is said that shortly after, Elsa wakes up bundled up inside a room. The most curious thing is that the first person to greet her was Victor, the man she was supposed to have killed and about whom she had heard all sorts of bad rumors. They began to chat, and Victor reveals that he didn't die thanks to the power of his blessing. It is worth noting here that a blessing is not the same thing as a divine protection. As far as I remember, a blessing is a type of power or spirit that Ode Glass gives you when you start serving as an acolyte knight. One way or another, this blessing brought Victor Victor back to life right at the moment Elsa was incapacitated by her former ally. It is said that Victor fought him and not only won, but also managed to slash his face. After defeating him, a girl named Nora begged Victor not to kill her, and that is how they ended up taking Elsa with them. Back in the present, Elsa sees the girl and recognizes her. It is said that when she attacked the carriage, it was Nora who stepped in front of the other children to try to defend them. Now, Elsa asks the girl why she saved her, and then the girl tells her how she was saved from dying by Victor in the past, how it hurts her that people accuse him of crimes he didn't commit when he is the person who saved her village, and how she was saved by the teachings of Gusteko. She still wants to keep living under those teachings even when those beliefs are currently against her. After hearing this, and confirming that it was Nora herself who healed all her wounds, Elsa just tells her that surely the colors of her insides must be beautiful. Finally, Victor intervenes and asks her to leave as soon as she can move again. Elsa agrees, but before she recovers completely, she asks for a favor, to be given a needle and thread. As time passed and Elsa was healing, Nora was by her side the whole time and received lessons from Elsa on how to use a needle and thread. Elsa genuinely enjoyed the time she spent with her, since the girl had a talent for this craft. There, Elsa tells her a little bit about what her life was like as a slave and how she never wants to be one again. In a way, Nora understands and comforts her, so Elsa can't help but feel the need to repay her debt. During all this time, it is said that there were men in Victor's service who would enter and leave the building, and they didn't just do it to make sure Elsa wouldn't get violent and attack the girl, but because an imminent war was coming. It was a war that everyone knew they would lose. So after giving Nora a compliment for her skill with needles, Elsa tells her that she isn't very good at understanding the feelings of others. So if there is anything she needs, she can help her. That is how Nora asks her to save her, mentioning how Victor and his men are forced to fight a war they know they cannot win. Elsa only says that she will pay what she owes. After that, we see how Elsa escapes from Victor's mansion. But just when she thought she had gotten away, Victor finds her and gets into a fighting stance. He tells her that if she leaves with the full intention of reuniting with Igor's forces, he won't allow it. But if she has something else in mind, he asks her to tell him. After all, he doesn't want to ignore Nora's good wishes for her. Faced with Victor's honesty, Elsa only says that she will do as she pleases, and that statement of hers was enough for Victor to let her go. Although, before leaving, Elsa asks him to make sure they fight to the death the next time they meet. The funny thing is that upon seeing her leave, Victor mentions that he hopes that arrow doesn't turn against him, and this would be relevant later on. In this way, Elsa would return to Igor's mansion, and then the following would happen.
In a warm hall, Elsa was welcomed by an obese man named Igor Kenash, who, as her employer and leader of the Orkos domain purification operation, gave her a warm smile upon seeing her return. However, noticing the bandages on her arms, his expression became questioning, and he lamented that her beautiful fingers had been ruined. Elsa explained that it had been a battle, and that, when trying to take the lives of others, suffering wounds was inevitable. At this, Igor showed his displeasure at the inefficiency of his subordinate, the acolyte knight named Makarista, instead of worrying about Elsa's condition. Apparently, the clash between the two of them had not been reported to him, which led Elsa to suspect that there might have been a failure in communication, or that Makarista had died at Victor's hands, a possibility that left her disappointed, since she hadn't been able to see the guts of that spirit user yet. Putting her disappointment aside, Elsa inquired about the identity of the two young men standing behind Igor, who looked so much alike they seemed to be twins, and wore bright holy armor engraved with the holy seal, confirming they were members of the acolyte knights. When Elsa suggested that new guards had arrived during her absence, Igor confirmed they were sent from the high-ranking officials as proof that the kingdom considered their role important, adding that, if anything happened to him, the attack on the Orkos domain would fall apart, so Victor Orkos would be forced to try a desperate goal. Elsa commented, in a tone between admiration and sarcasm, that it was quite generous hospitality. At her words, the knights tensed up, but Igor asked them not to get upset, arguing that Elsa's charm was a poison too strong for them, since they couldn't let the sweet scent of debauchery lead them into making mistakes. Elsa, confessing she didn't quite understand those expressions, received a comment from Igor that it was best for a beautiful woman not to be wise, since being loved was enough, and she didn't need to speculate about complex matters. Although the reasoning was irrational, Elsa didn't feel particularly offended, since she believed that people with foolish ideas weren't worth her time. Igor, changing the subject, expressed his joy at her return, and assured her that she shouldn't worry about her wounded arms, since soon she wouldn't need her limbs anymore. Elsa frowned at that ominous comment, and before she could react, the two acolyte knights lunged at her. Moments later, Elsa's vision was cut off by a sharp diagonal flash that sliced through the wind. Only the fact that she had anticipated a surprise attack kept it from being fatal. The knights kept up their offensive with the sound of the wind cut by weapons, which led Elsa to comment that, between the twin whips and the acolytes' combat styles, she always found something interesting. While she prepared herself with a fighting spirit, Igor backed away and stepped off the battlefield. When Elsa asked about the lack of reports regarding the conflict with his subordinate, Igor admitted he knew nothing about it, claiming he only punished suspects and that his intention was to eliminate the elements that weren't in the previous plan, also confessing that he planned to cut off her limbs to make her his favorite concubine once matters were settled. Elsa, smiling with joy at the revelation of Igor's cruel nature, admitted that for the first time she found him likable thanks to his twisted hobbies. When Igor offered her to become his favorite in exchange for her limbs, assuring her it wouldn't hurt, Elsa apologized, saying she preferred to prioritize her own hobbies. Instead, she declared she was willing to give love to his insides. Right after, the knights' twin whips engulfed the great hall, destroying marble and carpets, while the thorns on the whips tore through flesh. Elsa, with her arms hanging down, dodged the attacks with elegant movements, moving through the space as if the laws of physics didn't apply to her. Igor, seeing that his instant victory wasn't coming, scolded the knights, causing them to increase the speed and lethality of their whip strikes. Elsa, feeling that the attacks were good, but not enough, jumped toward the ceiling and destroyed a huge crystal lamp. The mass of the lamp fell, forcing the knights to jump away to avoid being crushed. Elsa took advantage of the confusion to catch the whips with her hands, not caring about the pain from the thorns, and tied them to the fallen chandelier, throwing it away to drag one of the knights along with its momentum. After separating the brothers and using one as a human shield against the other's whip strikes, Elsa inflicted similar wounds on them, and finally pulled them toward each other so they would collide. With their torsos lined up, Elsa drew a kukri and, in a single flash, sliced through the twins' armor and bodies, ending their lives in a sea of blood and guts. After confirming the knights' deaths, Elsa examined their remains with fascination, noticing that, even though they were twins, their insides were completely different. Igor, seeing his dead escorts, stammered in terror, but Elsa reminded him that her weapons were fully healed, since she hadn't actually suffered serious wounds under the bandages. When Igor tried to beg for his life, citing his command under the Church of Gusteko, and warning that his death would make her an enemy of the kingdom, Elsa closed her eyes with delight upon hearing such a description. With a smile full of murderous intent, she confirmed to him that that title sounded lovely, which caused Igor to flee in a panic toward the depths of the mansion, screaming for help. Igor ran frantically through the hallways looking for his more than 20 mercenaries, but upon realizing there was no sign of them, he realized how strange the situation was. Suddenly, a voice that sounded like a young maiden's but lacked youth shook his eardrums from above. Looking up toward the voice, his mind reached the limit of its endurance. He was standing in front of a powerful demonic beast with jaws full of sharp fangs, understanding at the last second why the mercenaries hadn't responded. After hearing a final goodbye from the creature, Igor Kanash's life came to an end.
At the same time this was happening, Logres, along with his squad and Makarista, launched the final assault on Victor's fortress. Because Elsa had disappeared, they assumed that Victor was the one who killed her, so they were prepared. After using a war tactic, they managed to start the confrontation by making a large mana stone explode, which blew off one of Victor's legs. Even though he had lost a limb, Victor faced everyone alone and managed to take down half of his rivals, but the weight of his wounds was too much, and when he fell to the ground, he thought that it seemed Elsa hadn't arrived in time. Instantly, Makarista arrives, and he can't help but voice his resentment for the wounds Victor gave him a few days ago, and in the middle of this scolding, Elsa arrives and the following happens.
Just when the situation seemed unbearable, a familiar voice, full of a glamorous tone, broke into the place and stopped everyone present from moving. With light steps, a lonely woman dressed in black and with a long braid of the same color landed in the middle of the great hall's devastation. She gave the men who had frozen stiff a terrifying look, lamenting that they hadn't had the chance for a lucky meeting, even though she had gone to a lot of trouble to get ready. Logres, who felt a terrible foreboding upon reuniting with her, watched her as Elsa tilted her head and whispered languidly. The newcomer's gaze passed right by Logres and Makarista to lock onto Victor, who was slowly dying. Victor asked her if she had returned like a stray arrow to finish him off, to which Elsa denied, identifying herself as the Bowel Hunter and stating she had come back because she brought something he wanted. She commented with regret that, if he wanted her to hand it over, she would have preferred they fight for it, since that was her hope. With that comment, Elsa lifted a strange round, black package about the size of an arm, whose shape and size brought about an unpleasant feeling. From Elsa's amused expression, Logres guessed that whatever was wrapped inside was nothing good. She added that both the man and his domains were finished, so that gift was now a waste. Macarista interrupted her talk, demanding she stop being so carefree, while clutching his blood-soaked bandage and glaring at Victor with hatred. Macarista reproached him, asking how he dared show his face before him after having his eyes ripped out, recalling their promise to fight to the death if they met again. Elsa agreed with absolute indifference, although that exchange allowed Logres to understand the origin of the dispute. The scars on Macarista's face had been carved by Victor, and that was probably the reason why Elsa had disappeared during the mission. Macarista, trying to boost his own importance, asked her if she thought she could win by joining that man, whose enemy was the Church of Gustako and the Holy King himself. Elsa, on the other hand, mocked him, commenting that he was making the exact same mistake as his master. Right after, Elsa untied the knot of the package, which opened and fell to the floor, miserably rolling out the head of Igor Kenash, who had died with his eyes and mouth wide open in horror. Logres, although he suspected what the wrapping contained, couldn't help but cover his face against the macabre reality. The death of Igor, who had been named general by order of the church, was nothing less than an act of direct hostility. As Macarista screamed out, Elsa Granhiert had already become an enemy of the Holy Kingdom of Gusteko. When Macarista lashed out at her, asking if she understood what she had done, Elsa asked him to end that tedious talk. In that moment, a thick smell of death and a demonic atmosphere enveloped her, completely transforming her into the Bowel Hunter. Elsa declared that she acted as she pleased, and that it didn't matter if the enemy was the church or the kingdom, since she had spent a lot of time thinking about it. Logres questioned if she had really thought it through, since the result seemed completely reckless, but she stood by her plan while pointing at Victor, the Crimson Hunting Squad, and the Acolyte Knight. Drawing her kukri, Elsa licked her tongue, and with her black eyes immersed in a dark and wet lust, wondered how she would manage to cut out all their insides. When Logres asked if she also meant them, Elsa replied with an ironic smile that she was sure she would have fun dancing with them. Logres, baffled by that blameless and almost childish smile, felt uneasy, unlike Macarista, who considered talking useless and decided to enforce the death penalty as an Acolyte Knight. Elsa asked him if that meant he would be her opponent, to which he replied that he would make her forget the luck of having survived, and that she would regret not escaping. Enraged, Macarista invoked a pale light that transformed into a blue-scaled snake, a spirit that displayed extraordinary power. Elsa, however, felt that this bright young man, destined to hold the highest positions in the church, was truly someone to be pitied for having crossed her path. Shortly after, Elsa simply observed that if the spirit user died first, his spirit vanished too, right after destroying the heart of Macarista, who let out a final cry before dying. His body was left stabbed in multiple places, especially in the abdomen, a sight so horrifying that even Logres's veteran mercenaries wanted to look away. Elsa, wiping the bloodstain off her kukri, turned to them, asking what they planned to do next. Logres, timidly, told her they had nothing to do, since even though officially they were supposed to fight to the death, they were no longer in the mood for it, especially because those who could order them to act were all dead. Elsa, ironically, asked if they already knew she would take care of that opportunity, to which the mercenaries confirmed that, of course, they were aware. Given the impossibility of fighting in that atmosphere, their killing intent faded away with regret. Logres asked her, with genuine curiosity, how she had managed to do all that in just 4 days. Considering the distance between Igor's mansion and the Orcos domain, Elsa revealed she had borrowed her sister's legs. To Logres's confusion, a huge shadow suddenly emerged from behind her, as if it had stepped out of the darkness. It was a demonic beast, a creature with black fur and 4 legs, a type of beast known as a shadow lion. What surprised Logres even more was the young red-haired girl who rolled off the beast's back, clutching the dying Victor in desperation. Despite her scrapes, the girl begged Victor not to die, but after a final whisper that was inaudible to Logres, the traitor Victor Orcos passed away. Logres, overwhelmed by the chain of events, put his hands to his head at that outcome. Silence took over the room until the young girl broke the quiet and, looking at Elsa with eyes full of bloodlust, asked her why she hadn't saved Victor and the others. Elsa tilted her head with curiosity at the question, realizing that when the girl asked her to save her, she meant for her to save Victor. Confirming her suspicion, Elsa explained honestly that, after saving her, she considered the debt between them settled, and afterwards she just made sure to put her own fun first. Yet she still ended up offering an apology without the slightest trace of hesitation. Because her words were so honest, everyone present had no choice but to believe her, since that was the true way Elsa Granhiert thought.
And so, Elsa's story would soon come to an end as she apparently returned to Gusteko. If you're wondering what happened after Elsa realized that the girl had actually asked her to save everyone and she had misunderstood her wish, it is said that the girl grabbed a dagger and tried to end Elsa's life, but she was stopped by Logrez's mercenaries. It seems Elsa is satisfied with the result because, by seeing that the girl now hates her, that will make the girl seek to grow up and eventually take revenge against her. And as for Logrez, let's just say that Logrez manages to convince her not to fight under the excuse that he considered her an ally. So Elsa says goodbye to them, but not before asking him to take care of Nora. Shortly after, Elsa would meet Meili, who had a guilty low with her, and it was that beast that Elsa used to get quickly to the mission points. They just have a chat, commenting on the things Elsa did in this novel. Things you already know from the revelations I'm telling you in this video. But the most interesting thing is that Meili points out that Elsa didn't get the money for the mission payments and has also turned all of Gusteko against her, which will make it difficult for Capella to operate in that region. Meili concludes by saying that their mother will be furious, although it seems that Elsa doesn't care about that. What I'm about to say now is something I don't remember where I got it from, but I still think it's a great headcanon. Do you remember how Meili was punished by Capella? Well, I would swear I read that when Elsa was punished the same way, she didn't care about anything, since her nature simply didn't allow her to break like Meili. And honestly, after seeing how careless Elsa can be, I believe it. I hope that one day I remember the excerpt of where I read this. Finally, because the girls can no longer operate easily in Gusteko, they decided which nation they would go to next. And while they were discarding Kararagi, Elsa says that her instinct tells her they should go to the Dragon Kingdom, that is, to Lugunica. Now, what follows are a series of side stories that were not in the anime, and that tell us what Elsa did while Subaru was having his adventures, and I will cover all of them, absolutely all the novels, in the third and final part tomorrow. But that is all for now. Remember that making this video takes a lot of work behind the scenes, and soon, I plan to make one with the story of the novel called EX1, a novel that explores Crucia's relationship with Felix and the late Prince Fourier, who currently has an important legacy in the novel. But that will be a more complicated video because there are more action scenes, so if you want to support, I will leave the link to my Ko-fi. I want to clarify that I am not conditioning the creation of the video on reaching a goal, as I have always said I can finance the videos on my own, but if anyone wants to support, you are more than welcome. I also share my Instagram where I usually answer messages and share snippets of my day-to-day life in case anyone wants to follow me. Now I really must say goodbye.